way. So, Kevin, I want to welcome you to the Three Guys podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
No. Listen, I appreciate you being here because I think this is a very important topic. Like I said before, because this pact was released recently, and my father applied and then just got rejected, and it was frustrating. And I'm reading over everything, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And you got to go through hoops. But Kevin, that's what we have you here for, to explain more about it and all the issues that you deal with, veteran services. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with veteran services.
Well, thank you very much, Derek. My involvement with veteran services has been about 15 years. I've been involved directly with the veterans. Before that, I had a checkered past. I was a sales guy for computers, and I've done all sorts of things. I've installed things that you had to make and things that somebody else made. But I've had a very varied life. But this last 15 years has been the best part of my life because I'm working with people that I never would have met in my whole life. And the other side of that coin is I get a chance to help them out. And as you all know, if you help somebody out, there's always a feedback loop on it, and that's the good part. It's not just working with federal VA claims. I also do statewide claims as well, but we're not getting into that tonight. We're going to stay with the VA. And when I talk about the VA, that's the Veterans Affairs. That's a branch of the United States government. And the VA is divided into two parts. And I want to make your audience aware that tonight we are only going to be talking about the claims side of the house. That's the side where somebody has a disability or they're trying to get a special pension. And that's the side of the VA that it goes to. The other side of the VA is the medical care side of the house. And I'm on both of those houses. I am a disabled vet, and I also get medical care on the medical side of the house. I would like to say up front that the medical side of the house is very good. I think all of the veterans who deal, especially here in the Northeast, who deal with the VA on the medical issues, they're getting good care. And they're probably getting a lot better care than a veteran, let's say, living in the middle of Nebraska or Kansas, where he might have to travel 200 or 300 miles just to make a medical appointment.
Yeah.
And if he gets there and he finds out that they've double booked him, that's a real problem. Here in the Northeast, the medical people are, in some cases, we're referred out to the premier teaching hospitals in the world, the ones right here in Boston. So the VA medical care is excellent. But back to what we're here for tonight, and that's the VA claims side of the house. There's three things that I plan to talk about tonight. I'm more than happy to go anywhere that you guys want to go. But the first thing I wanted to talk about would be the amount of money that is paid to a disabled veteran, the monthly check for being a disabled veteran. The second thing I'd like to talk about is what I call the Voodo Math. And that Voodo Math applies to how the VA computes multiple disabilities for a veteran. And in the third area, with your permission and certainly your dad's permission, I'd like to talk a little bit about the PACT Act and how that directly applies to his situation. We don't have to make him the center of it all. We can just talk about this idea of what do they pay a disabled veteran, and let's define what a disabled veteran is. A disabled veteran means that that individual, man or woman, had some experience, some injury, something happened to them while they were in the service, while they were on active duty, something that disabled them. And it does not mean a veteran who got out of the service was perfectly healthy and later on became disabled. It's important to distinguish it. It's what they call a service-connected injury. Let's say you're a veteran, you get out of the service. If you got out when I got out back in the 60s, in the 70s, and even more back in the 40s and 50s, they basically said bye-bye. And you were more than happy to just get out of there. There were no, what they call today, demobilizations. There was no effort to ask you, do you feel good? Did you have any problems where you were in? Did you break any bones? How's your hearing? And off you went, and you were happy to go. And I got out of the service in 1969. I was in from 1965 to 69. That was the Vietnam era, and I came in through California. I was in the Gulf of Tonkin on an aircraft carrier. I came into the port in Long Beach, and there were restaurants at that time that said, "We do not serve uniforms." Of course, California, a fairly liberal state, but that was their attitude toward Vietnam vets. We do not serve uniforms. And I've talked to many guys who went through LAX, Los Angeles airport, and the first thing they do when they got off the aircraft was to go into a bathroom and change into civilian clothes so that they would not be literally harassed and in some cases spat upon because they were members of Lieutenant Calley's gang, if you will. Everybody thought the My Lai incident represented what was going on in Vietnam. We've since learned that that war was really nothing more than a banker's war, and most of them are. And it was done so that a lot of people made a lot of money, and they didn't care that they killed millions of people, 56,000 of them being American service people. Back to our subject, if I'm a married man, let's say I'm a married man or woman, it doesn't matter, and I'm a disabled vet, I have 2 children, my spouse lives with me, and because of my disability, I can't take care of our 2 children, so my spouse has to stay home. So the only income for that household is my income as a disabled vet. And I'm 100%, this is our case, our speculative case here, I'm 100% disabled, and in this case, we'll say I've lost both legs. The most money that the federal government through the VA will pay me and my family is $46,000 a year. May go up a little bit here because of special circumstances, but not more than 1,000 or 2. So that's the top dollar that household will bring in as a thank you for your service with the country.
How did they arrive at that number?
How did I arrive at it?
No, not you. How does the government arrive at that number?
I don't know that. I don't know that. I think it probably was something that was established many, many years ago and then just went up with COLAs after that. It's never really been addressed head on as to whether does this measure up to what people need to live on. I think it was based on an early standard, and every time there was a 2 or 3% COLA raise, up it went. Because it goes in sync with what you see for the Social Security. So the disability got 8.79% last year. Now, let's just for a second take a look at what some of the other averages are for household incomes. I did look this up on Google. That was all I did is look it up on Google. So I'm not an expert on something called household median income.
Yeah.
But if you remember that our disabled vet with no legs and his family entirely dependent on anything he can get, he's making about $46,000 a year. The median household income for the United States is about $77,000 a year. I was really surprised to see that. I thought that was a high figure, but that is the figure that popped up every time I was looking for it.
So you're saying households? So that would be 2 household members working?
No, it means whatever the household's bringing in.
Yeah. So essentially, you're talking about a husband and wife.
It could be a husband and wife. It could be a husband and wife. Yeah. So yeah, there's more. There could be more than one person contributing. And in the veteran's case, if he could allow his wife to get out and work, and he didn't have to care for the kids, maybe he would have more household income coming in. I think the really important distinction between the two is the disabled veteran raised his hand and he said, "Look, I'll defend myself. I'll defend my country with my life." And that's the thing that really should be taken into consideration when they're paying these people. Instead of just saying, well, we'll pay them the least amount because the VA doesn't have strong lobbyists, and many may not even have lobbyists. And I think all of us know, wink, wink, that Congress does respond to lobbyists more than it responds to people who do not lobby.
Mm-hmm.
And with that in mind, I think the pay is just way too low, way too low.
Well, I mean, again, being an attorney, you've heard personal injury attorneys when you're slapping on a figure for someone who's younger, is scarred or anything like that. There's numbers placed on that where you're losing out on working experience, and those numbers are a lot higher. Not that I do this work than 46,000. You've agreed to a number that I don't even know how that's possible for the lifetime of someone, where their working experience when they're younger is when they have a chance to make the most. As they get older, obviously that changes, but $46,000 is a ridiculous amount.
Well,
I don't know how they arrived at that.
If I can expand on that a little bit, Derek, let's take an example of a veteran who went over to Vietnam, was exposed to Agent Orange, and developed diabetes mellitus too. Also had a heart condition, but because of the special wording in the VA definitions of what a heart condition is, he is only receiving disability income for his diabetes mellitus too. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say that individual passes away. If his death certificate reads that he died of a heart condition instead of diabetes mellitus 2, his family will not get a penny after his death. It stops, unless he was collecting 100% for 10 years, which is a whole other situation. But if that death was not caused by the disabling condition and he was not at 100%, they will not pay that family a dime. They just cut him right off at that point. If he was at 90% and he died, the family gets nothing at all. Now, I want to compare that to a corporation that sent its people out to work, knowing that those people were going to be exposed to a toxic substance that would probably maim them and eventually kill them. And the United States government knew that about Agent Orange. And that private company put its people out in the field, and then they sued the government. How much money do you think they would have gotten if the government gave them permission to sue it, as they've suddenly done with Camp Lejeune? We're talking millions. That's why you saw all the lawyers on TV all of a sudden.
Yeah,
right.
It changed the picture because the government said you can sue me. Otherwise, you know this better than I. But
I understand. I know CJ could talk more about this, because I think what you described right there is what his father went through.
CJ, go ahead.
My father went through the same scenario. He was only on disability for his diabetes, though he had a heart condition also. And we didn't know, because we weren't educated. We didn't know that he probably could qualify to be 100% disabled, even though, he was he was definitely in a bad place the last 10 years of his life. But so at the end of his life, we were trying to get him to qualify for 100% disability, but he was in the hospital and out of the hospital so often that he needed to be, it was crazy what needed to be done, but he needed to be home for a period of time so they could come out and interview him and talk to him in order to qualify him for a higher level of disability. And he ended up dying from liver failure, and we attribute that to my father wasn't a drinker or anything, so we attribute that to Agent Orange. But my father used to always talk about the other effects that Agent Orange had in it, and there's been studies done that dioxin, I believe it's called, in Agent Orange, changes the DNA of the individual that is exposed to it. Have you heard that?
Yes, I have heard that, and I see it in the medical information that a lot of my veterans put in to support their claims. It points out that those toxins, dioxin being one of them, actually changes the genetic makeup of the cells, and the effect of it is not immediate, although it can be immediate, but it is not something that the VA recognizes. For instance,
Right.
rash or different things that says the body's reacting to some poisonous substance.
Well, there's also the real tragedy in obviously your DNA being changed is there's the possibility that your offspring would be affected by your exposure to Agent Orange. Am I right in saying that?
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
there's been studies done, and it. I mean, the effects of the dioxin in that chemical that polluted the soldiers in Vietnam. I mean, there are studies being done right now that have extended that exposure to the children of those veterans.
Yes.
It's you know, it's crazy, but
Do you think, CJ, that that's what led to the issue with?
My father always would say that. So as a young man, I have a genetic disorder with my heart. My heart stopped pumping. There was no real reason. There was really nobody in my family that had that issue. And we did some research, and the VA doesn't recognize the type of heart condition that I had, but my heart was deformed at birth. I had a bicuspid valve, which was leaky and regurgitating, which led to cardiomyopathy, which led to me having a heart that failed as a young man, and I needed to have a heart transplant. I don't know if it was caused by Agent Orange, but I certainly would love to see studies that on that, to see if, maybe I'm not the only one that's been, that's gone through that scenario. But anyway, so at the end of my father's life, like you said, and you said it, I don't have to repeat it, but you said it straight up. At the end of my father's life, we didn't know that you had to have his cause of death on his death certificate had to be either diabetes or something like that. On his death certificate, it said that he died from the cirrhosis of the liver. So that did not qualify him for any other benefits. And the day that he died, his benefits were ceased. My father, fortunately, was in a place where he had enough money for his burial services. But we reached out to the VA, and we reached out to some folks, the DAV and so forth, and we tried to get some help in regards to his burial expenses, but we were denied. And there was a lot of there was a lot of if you want to do it, you got to do this, you got to do that, and we just said forget it, and we just paid for his burial. But it was to watch your father die, and my father obviously he died because of his exposure to Agent Orange, protecting and defending his country. it was a sad end of his life, and he was a good man, and me and my sister really was his angel, and not, I was there to support her, but she really took care of him at the end. But I felt bad because she quit her job for a year just to care for him, and she got no benefits from that. She got no help. The VA did not support her. It was a lot of red tape to get any type of help from them, which never came. And it's unfortunate for families that have to sacrifice and get no support for somebody like my father, who died because he was exposed to something in defending his country.
Kevin, can you let the listeners know exactly what Agent Orange is? I don't know, maybe some people don't know what it is and how it affects. I think that's something important to describe what it is.
Yeah, Agent Orange is a chemical compound that is primarily used to kill foliage, to cause the leaves of trees to die. And the reason it became very popular in Vietnam was that the North Vietnamese, the enemy, were moving people, supplies, tanks, cars, trucks, everything, ammunition, under the canopy of a jungle. And so we went over there with millions and millions of gallons of this defoliant, anti-leaf material, a chemical compound that had been made back in the 50s at some point. Everybody knew this stuff was poisonous. And we just went out and started to spray it out of airplanes. And we sprayed the whole damn countryside starting in about 1964 through the southern part of Vietnam, and went right up through the northern part. And by 1965, 1966, almost the whole country had been sprayed, to the extent that if you go to the VA with a claim that you were exposed to Agent Orange, the VA will say, were you in Vietnam for more than one day? All you had to do was put what they call a boot on the ground. And if you had the boots on the ground, you are exposed to Agent Orange, no matter where you were in Vietnam between 1964 and 1975. One of the fellows I worked with was a tank commander in there. And he would be at the top of his tank, and there was a whip antenna. And as he would go through the trees, the whip antenna would whip the Agent Orange off it onto him, into his throat, into his mouth. This man is now in his 7th year with his 2nd liver. And the VA doesn't really recognize that as a cause. So I hope that's a good layman's description of it, because that's about as far as I can go with it.
No, that's fine, because we wanted to see basically what it is and how it affects the individual. It's obviously CJ's father, and then that they've came out with the 2022 Veterans Pact, which basically was exposure to
veterans. The PACT Act of 2022 is a little different. The PACT Act of 2022 is taking aim at veterans who are exposed to toxic smoke over in Iraq and Afghanistan, but it also extended the Agent Orange presumed conditions to include high blood pressure. And that's something that you and I may want to discuss.
Yeah, of course.
But the Agent Orange itself was affected, or at least the claims that are presumed was affected by the PACT Act that way. And there may have been other minor things, but that was the major one, the hypertension. Previous to that, they recognized bladder cancer just a little while ago, and they had said that that was not associated with Agent Orange. Of course, go back 15 or 20 years, they said nothing was associated with Agent Orange. It wasn't until the Vietnam Veterans of America pushed the button.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they wouldn't admit to that, and now people are suffering. But I guess to expound on that, I mean, so now with the, and I don't want to skip around because I know if you want to continue on what you were talking about, but with the PACT Act, I think you've seen, especially my father now came out and it was applied for it because of the hypertension and where that led to him meeting you and whatnot. But So I don't know if you want to expand on the PACT Act, if you want to go back to what you were talking about, you originally started on, but feel free to take it any way you want because I don't want to miss out
Oh,
on
well,
something.
I'll move over to the PACT Act and your dad. CJ, do you have anything you want to throw in there before I go over to here?
No, you're great. You're handling this perfectly.
Uh, when your dad's situation is interesting, and I think, do we have your dad's permission to talk specifically about
Oh
it
yeah,
here?
yeah.
Okay. He's in a situation where he was exposed to Agent Orange, and he has high blood pressure. With the PACT Act, the VA said, if you have high blood pressure, number one, and number two, you were exposed to Agent Orange, we will, number three, presume that your high blood pressure was caused by your exposure to Agent Orange. You don't have to do anything more to prove that. They will presume it. And these presumptive conditions are really the key conditions for Agent Orange, because if you go to them and you say, I've got hemorrhoids, or I've got a swollen tongue, or God forbid, you've got esophageal cancer, many of people do, they'll just turn you down flat out, because it's not a presumed condition, no matter how much medical evidence you provide. You may win it on appeal, but that could take you 2 or 3 years to get there. Let's go back to your dad's situation. Now we have a presumed condition, meaning we, the VA, will say that you have a service-connected disability. That's what the word presumed means. It takes you right over that hurdle. Do you have to prove that this was caused by my time in the service? No, you don't have to do that. They presume that it was caused by your time in the service. So your dad's hypertension is presumed to have been caused by his time in the service. Well, what's he going to get out of it? Well, the VA says, well, we got to test it. We got to find out how severe that blood pressure is. So they tell him to come in for a special test. They also ask him to test himself 3 times, and then they have him come into a specialist of some kind, and that specialist, following VA guidelines, gives him the test. Well, can we speak specifically about your dad's situation?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your dad's blood pressure came back where his reading for the lower value, the systolic value, was under 130. Now, if you have a diastolic blood pressure of 130 or more, you should be in a hospital, for God's sakes.
Right.
But
Yeah.
in any case, your dad's blood pressure came in under 130. And the upper level, the systolic, was not over 160. So the VA said, well, based on these readings, yeah, we agree that you've got high blood pressure caused by your exposure to Agent Orange, but we'll just give you the disability rating by itself. We'll call it a 0 rating, and we won't pay you anything. And this is what they seem to be doing. Now, I'm making a very large assumption there, but based on my very small experience, I am seeing the VA say, yes, we'll give you a service-connected disability, so we're following the letter of the law with the PACT Act. We're presuming that it was caused by your connection to Agent Orange. But at the same time, nothing in that law says that we have to pay you a specific amount, so we'll pay you 0. And then you look at it a little more deeply and you say, well, how is your dad handling his blood pressure? Does he take anything for it? Is he on any kind of a medication? And it turns out that, yes, he is, as are many people who can't manage their blood pressure with just diet alone. And he took that test while he was on medication. Well, now, wait a minute. Is that a fair evaluation of the severity of that high blood pressure to measure him while he is on medication? I'll give you a comparative example, and that's me personally. I'm hard of hearing because I stood too close to jet planes. So when I was measured for my hearing loss, they didn't say, put your hearing aids on. They wanted to measure me raw. when the VA measures somebody for back pain, they don't give them painkillers to see if they can make the pain go away. And yet, for some reason, there is no clear definition from the VA on medicated versus unmedicated. There seems to be some judicial wording that goes back to the 80s. I think you may have uncovered some of it, Derek, where the VA says they should lean toward an unmedicated examination, but it's not clearly defined. So in your dad's situation, we are going to take that, we are taking that to a board of veteran appeals, and we're going to have it listened to by people who I have very high respect for. I have been involved with a few Board of Veteran Appeals cases. The people who handle these as judges, I don't know if that's the correct term for them, they're very, very educated, very, very good people. And interestingly, about 80% of the cases come down in favor of the veteran. So that's where we're at with that one. And the VA will then just have to follow. Well, I can't say for sure they'll have to follow whatever the decision is, but it will have an important influence on their decisions in the future.
Well, I think that was the issue, because if you go on, my father is on a Vietnam veteran Facebook page, and there was multiple people who had the same problem where they were complaining that they got rejected. And you see the frustration. The problem I was having with what they were stating was, you're asking someone who's on medication, you're gonna take them off their medication and then test them.
Yeah,
I mean, at this, I mean, like, it would be like saying, that if you take a certain pill, I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, so then I'm going to risk a week of being off my high blood pressure pills so I can go in there and show you my true level of percentage that you can pay me on. I think it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. If he, and then you have a 60% too. I noticed that, right? Who in God's green earth is getting 60%? They should be dead.
60%. I said 160.
No. But my point is, there's a percentage. It goes from 10% to 40. I saw you can get up to 60%.
Yeah.
Who had 60%? If you wouldn't be, I don't think you'd be alive.
No,
if you were getting 60, your blood pressure would be skyrocketing at that point in time.
I would think you'd have to be, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So who in God's green earth are they giving that 60% to? I mean, why don't you say to someone, okay, you know what? What dosage of the high blood pressure are you taking? It's pretty simple, right? They do it for cholesterol. They give you, okay, you go in there. What dosage are you taking? Wouldn't that be the easiest way? They say, okay, well, your dosage is 1 pill or 2 pills a day at this level. We'll presume that you should get X amount for a percentage that you're doing that. That's the easiest way of doing it, rather than saying, let's take the unmedicated level and have someone come off it at their age when they're. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it makes no sense at all. You can't risk the life of the individual to test them. Now, what you're saying is good. You could do a evaluative thing where you're saying if you're on X amount of this medication, that could be extrapolated to mean you have this type of blood pressure. The other thing that might also be available would be early diagnostic tests. If in that medical record, there's a record of somebody with 130 or 160 over 130, when they took their blood pressure, why couldn't that be considered something to evaluate as well? So some of the raw data that was available before medication. And there may well be guys that are so borderline, that they're not that bad that they would go off their meds. And knowing this ahead of time to go in and take what's called the COMP test, the compensation test. And
yeah, well, they discourage, because now people are discouraged, and then there's and listen, I'm an attorney. I'm not going to be the first one to tell you this, but you have attorneys out there with law offices saying we can help you with your appeal. You're getting a percentage of a veteran's appeal, and I know I'm going to get chastised for some other attorneys, but you got to be kidding me! Like, I'm asking to take a small percentage of whatever you win on the appeal for your back pay.
They can't get more than 25% of the record.
But you shouldn't get. I'm sorry, but these are people that fought, especially in Vietnam. Most of them were drafted. You threw them over there. You dumped a chemical on them, and they should be presumed to be that they're disabled, right? They make that presumption that they're disabled based on the fact they were exposed to Agent Orange, and then you discourage them to do that, and then they go hire an attorney again, and now they have to do that. They get a percentage of what your back pay, and again, at the small end of 10%, I think we're talking between diabetes and what my father was saying, blood pressure, maybe $500 a month. I mean, don't quote me that price, but you're kidding me, really?
Yeah, until you get to 100%, 100% is paying about $3,600 a month. But if you drop down to 90%, you're down to about $1,900 a month. So it's a huge drop between 90 and 100. And the increments go up in layers of 10%, 10%, 20%, 30%. That's it. There's no in between until you get to the Voodo Math, and I can't wait to get to at the end.
Well, before you do that, I mean, CJ, did your father? I mean, was that what bet did he get? And I don't know if you want to talk about it. If you don't, that's fine.
No, that's fine. No,
I don't.
I mean, my father. So I didn't know a lot. I mean, I took care of my father's finances after his wife died for the last 10 years of his life, but I didn't know that there was levels of. I didn't know that there was levels of this disability. I mean, he was receiving about $1,900 a month, and it was crazy because there was really it was very difficult to get straight answers or to even get anybody that could help walk you through the process of applying for disability for Agent Orange exposure. And I have like a real question, and my question is, what if I was a veteran, or if I was somebody that was taking care of a veteran, what would be the first thing that you would do to try to help a veteran get compensated and get compensated properly? Because I believe my father wasn't fully compensated. I mean, he was, my father was not he wasn't a highly intelligent person. He didn't understand the process. He didn't have a son who was a lawyer. And no offense to Derek. I mean, his father's a great guy, and I'm sure his father's blessed to have Derek as a lawyer. But for people, for the normal person out there that doesn't have the resources that some other people have, what's the process?
Well, the process is, according from the VA standpoint, you as an individual can just write a letter to them and say, I have diabetes mellitus 2. Excuse me. I was boots on the ground in Vietnam. Help. And they will react to that, but it might be 2 or 3 years of first-class mail going back and forth between that veteran and the VA before anything's going to be established. So the best course for that individual is to find a person like me. I'm called a veteran service officer. I'm not only state certified, but I'm nationally certified to handle VA cases. That's no big deal. Just means I sat in the classroom for 2 or 3 days. But I've also been doing it for 15 years. So it helps to have a little experience on it. I want to add one thing too. The state of Massachusetts has a guy like me in every city and town in Massachusetts by state law. The city and town has to provide an individual, and that person has to be certified to do the job.
You're covering four areas. Am I correct?
We're a region.
Yeah.
There are different regions around, and that works out to the benefit for shared costs without getting into that. But that's who they would look for. That's who that individual would look for, a veteran service officer. If he lived in Seabrook, and he couldn't persuade me to take his case, I could take his case because I can take them from Timbuktu for that matter. But if he had to rely on the resources in New Hampshire, he would then have to go to the county seat for Seabrook and find the VSO within that county and have that VSO respond to him in a timely manner.
Yeah, that's difficult. Yeah, we had a difficult time because my father was living in Florida at the time. He had better resources in Ohio, but when he retired to Florida, he had limited resources. I mean, he had to travel far to even get to a VA center to be treated medically. But so in Massachusetts, like you just said, what people would do is they have resources because each town has somebody that is hired for the protection of the veterans and for the help of the veterans. But in other states, it's not so easy. But I don't think that every veteran, or especially every veteran's family, know and understand that there are resources available. How do you get that? How do you get that out to people so they know that?
Well, you basically just do everything you can to do it. I mean, here I am on Derek's podcast, and
right,
and anything you can do to make people aware. But what has happened for me over the course of the years is that word of mouth. One veteran talks to another. Go talk to Kevin Hunt. He might be able to help you out. And I get calls from people from all over the country, for that matter, where they just don't have anybody to turn to, and they want somebody to answer a question. And if it can be done over the phone, I'll do that. But if you live in Kansas, I can't meet with you.
Right.
And all of the people who do my job, they are really dedicated to this. It's a great group of people. It really is. And I would, if I lived in Massachusetts and I wanted to put in a disability claim, I would just look for the Veterans Office at City Hall in the town I lived in and find out who that person is. And if they have any questions further, if they know how to go through you, Derek, you can come to me, however.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I mean, anything we could do to help to get the word out, and actually, didn't as part of the process, I think with the PACT Act, didn't my father does he have to go through you first? Is that how it went, or
did he have to go through what?
Did he have to go through you first at the PACT Act? Is that how he reached out? Is that how you guys met? Is that how it worked, or?
I don't remember what it was that triggered your dad coming in. I think it was the PACT Act, that he had read something about it and felt that he was now more qualified than he was in the past.
Yeah.
I will say too, for the VA's benefit, this coming Saturday, well, we'll be on the air after this happens, but at a Council on Aging building in Amesbury, Massachusetts, on a Saturday morning, from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock, the VA will do what they're calling a town meeting. And at that town meeting, they explain the tenets of the PACT Act, what it involves, how you can utilize it, and they really make an effort on outreach. So it's not like they're hiding in the corner. They do make the outreach, but the target audience is so huge, and the effort that they're budgeted to make is small, so the two don't meet as well.
And I also don't want this to be where it's just about Agent Orange. Like you mentioned earlier about the PACT Act, it does affect individuals that were in Iraq or Afghanistan that were exposed to the pit fires or whatever they were, and so it's not just that. So I want people to be educated on that people who also recently served in those, that they can also apply. And I don't know if they go through the same rigmarole that a veteran's going through the Vietnam. I guess you could be the one, Kevin, once you see the as this moves forward, the results in return.
That's an interesting question. Who went through what? As far as battle conditions go, there are two entirely different battle conditions. You're in a desert versus a jungle. So you have the enemy that can hide versus the enemy that cannot hide. What were they exposed to in Iraq and Afghanistan is different than what the veterans were exposed to in Vietnam. For instance, the burn pit, what does that mean? At every installation throughout Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a hole in the ground that was dug with a large caterpillar. I'm talking something the size of a football field in some cases, maybe half that size. And at some point, when the first amount of waste was accumulated at the camp, and this isn't just paper, this could be any type of waste, including human waste, that gets dumped into the burn pit. And at some point, it's ignited with kerosene, and it burns and burns and burns, and it never stops because its fuel is continually created while the people are living there. So they just continually are throwing whatever they need to get rid of into the burn pit. That includes computer monitors, plastic computers. I have heard of vehicles actually being placed in it when they're de-embarking the camp. Anything that could conceivably burn is put into a burn pit. The stuff that's coming out of that smoke is loaded. It's loaded with toxins. As a kid, you're told not to smell the smoke of oak leaves because it might have poison ivy in them. Well, multiply that by 10,000 of what you've got in all the plastics that are being ignited over there. And
if I can't burn a computer at my house outside, why would I be able to burn a computer somewhere else and not think that that's a bad idea?
that's a very good point. That's an excellent point. And you know, the rules are, there are no rules over there. The other thing that those young men and women were exposed to is something called depleted uranium. In certain types of armor-piercing shells, the core of that projectile is made of what's called depleted uranium. It's a very, very hard substance. And it therefore has the ability to penetrate something like a tank. So it's used as a missile against tanks. Well, what does that mean? Because if it's sitting inside the projectile, it's inert. It doesn't matter. But once it explodes, once it hits something, that powder, that dust, that depleted uranium, which does have a radioactive element to it, is now littering the countryside. And it is littering the countryside in Iraq and Afghanistan. So not only are poor service people over there, but the civilians living in that country, the same way the poor civilians in Vietnam got mauled and mutilated, we've done the same thing to Iraq and Afghanistan. All again for profit.
You nailed it. You nailed it. We continue to send these young people to places that it was just they didn't need to do, and they don't take care of them, and then you don't take care of them when you get back.
No, we don't. And you know, this thing that's going on over in Ukraine, whatever you want to call it, we have troops on the ground over there. I mean, that's not officially recognized, but we do. And there is a group of people in this country who want to push Russia till we get a war going with Russia for reasons that I do not agree with, and I think most of the people in this country don't agree with. But that's what's happening. And we're going to be creating a lot more disabled vets if we don't watch ourselves.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. You know what, Kevin? Obviously we were going to talk about the VA's voodoo and computing multiple disabilities. And I know that was a topic that you were getting excited to talk about. I think there's some big issues with that. So please feel free to delve into that.
Well, if I were a veteran and I had a rating from the VA that said I am rated at 40% disabled. In fact, if you give me 1 second, I'm going to get my VA definition up here. So the VA says if you're rated at 40% for a disabling condition, and you have another one at 50% rated, you think the two of them would add up to 90, but they don't. And if you added 20% on top of that, you think the whole amount would be 50 plus 40 plus 20, 110%. And they don't pay 110, the highest they pay is 100. So in fairness, wouldn't you think you'd get 100%? 50, 40, 20. Add it up, you get 110. In fact, that individual, I'm going to need my glasses, but that individual who is at 60%, 40%, and 20%, that's 120% if you add them all up. The VA will pay them at 80%. And the reason they pay them at 80% is, I'll hold it up for your audience. Now you can see that there. That's the chart. And it's nothing more, you probably can't read that. It doesn't matter that you can, because even if you could, you wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated XY graph. And it basically says, if you've got this quantity over here on the X, well, when you read down on the Y column, that's the amount that applies. So instead of adding 60 and 40 and 20 and getting 120, when you add 60 to 40, you end up with something like 48. And when you add that 48 now to the 20, you come up with the 80% or whatever it is they come up with. So that's what I call voodoo math. Why do you have to have this complicated chart to compute what should be a linear progression? If I have a 40% disability, I'm 40% disabled. You've rated me at 40. If I have a 50% disability, you've rated me at 50. Why aren't the two of them combined to make 90% instead of 50 or 60 or whatever the heck that would come to? And that's what I call voodoo math. Let's say here too, it's important for your audience to understand how changes would occur if we had to change this. The Congress has to tell the VA, do this or do that. The Congress gives the VA their budget. They give them the money. Of course, the VA goes and asks for it. And they can only go and ask for it if they say, we have X number of veterans raising their hand. But the VA can only get whatever Congress gives them. And some mathematician someplace came up with this voodoo chart. And I think it would take an act of Congress, literally, to change that chart to something that's linear. You know, we're spending, I read a figure, and maybe somebody's going to correct me on this, but I believe that we just sent over to Ukraine $160 billion last month. 1 month. $160 billion. God only knows what that was going to be used for. I'd like to be at that party. But at the same time, what percentage of that, what small percentage of that could be used to not only raise the amount of money that's being paid to a disabled veteran, but also get rid of this voodoo math and pay them consecutively and linearly?
Well, I think, Kevin, you made note of it in the notes you sent over. This has been going on since World War I.
Yes.
You know, and every administration thereafter has not, has not fixed the problem. They've spent money other ways. And you hear this talk all the time, and it kills me that this patriotic talk about, well, this one, a veteran, this and that. And then I see what my father goes through, and I'm like, this is such a crock. This is such a crock. I mean, and what CJ's father went through. Why? I mean, why are we putting in for that? Simply, did you serve over there? Yep. We exposed to Agent Orange? Yep. That's it. That's it. But did you serve in Iraq? Did you serve in Afghanistan? Were you exposed to those situations? Yep. That's it. That's all you need to hear. That should be it. What are we playing games here with it? We're talking about a small amount of money for people who put their lives out there to protect us. And this is how they're treated. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure CJ can go into more about it because his father and maybe that math affected him, the voodoo math. I don't know how much he knows about that, but I think it's just unacceptable.
It is unacceptable, and I really am fascinated with really how knowledgeable you are, Kevin. And the parallels that you just tied to the fact that we're sending billions of dollars monthly over to Ukraine to support their war, and the entire budget for the VA in 2021 was $113 billion, and that and that cares for veterans' medical and obviously their disability pay. But it's so the biggest, I think, and you can correct me, but I think the biggest problem with the way that veterans are treated is just honestly the red tape and the difficulty that it takes to get veterans what they deserve. My father never received what he deserved. His children had to take time away from work and their families to care for him in his last year of his life, and that shouldn't be the case. Caregivers are angels, and my sister was a caregiver, and she was never compensated, and it's unfortunate how difficult it is for folks to get what they deserve. Unfortunately, Kevin, I can't thank you enough. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and I mean, you've got your numbers down pat. I know that's the job that you do, and you have I reviewed your resume. You have a fascinating resume. You've done a lot with between education and jobs, and you were a salesperson, but I really appreciate everything you say. I mean, you're spot on in regards to your job, I believe, and I hope that you can help Derek Stead get through with what he's and get what he deserves the most. And it's great to have you as a resource for our veterans.
I'm happy to do it, CJ. I mean, I really do love this job, and you wake up and you go to work and you say, well, damn it, it is 6:30. I'm not happy about that, but I do like where I'm going. So.
Right. I had a series of questions and I sent them over to Derek to just make sure that they were approved to ask. And I reviewed the questions, and you've answered every single question. I don't even, you've got it down. I mean,
yeah, you definitely do.
We're lucky to have you in this area. I appreciate you, Kevin. But I don't really have any other questions other than, what do you think, simply speaking, that we could do better as a government and as the VA to make it easier for folks to get what they need to survive?
Yeah, well, we've hit on the fiscal areas, and I think they have to be addressed. How much money is being paid to these people?
Right.
It's really a critical issue, and that has to be addressed through Congress. The VA they don't get the money unless it's given to them by Congress. And so
right.
The ultimate pipeline in is to talk to your congressperson and say to them,
Kevin, it's beyond that. My question is this.
All right.
That's all good and well.
Right.
But at the end of the day, no matter what we say and no matter what we do, there's folks out there right now that aren't getting the resources that they need. And it's difficult. It's got to be somewhere below a congressman. I mean, if you have to send a letter to the VA every month, year on and year out, and you're getting no results, there's a problem there. How does that part get fixed?
Well, that's, again, I hate to say it, CJ, I'm not saying go to your Congress kidders, but the VA is considered the largest bureaucracy in the world. And it's also a U.S. government agency which is eagerly adopting hiring people because they meet a certain quota, not because they have any merit for the job, and then they can't fire them. So you do have a number of instances that I'm seeing increasing where bureaucratic mistakes, egregious bureaucratic mistakes, are being made. How do you change that? Unless you change the law and you say you get rid of people who aren't merited for this job. I don't know. I don't have a good answer to your question, to be honest with you. As far as local help goes, a very local situation, I can't say enough for the local charities. I'm familiar with the local ones, Our Neighbor's Table, Pet and Guild House. These are groups that really, they help everybody, veterans obviously included. Housing authorities will give preference to veterans. In some cases, commercial establishments will give discounts to veterans.
Right.
Lowe's and Home Depot being a good example.
Oh yeah.
But other than that, it's an uphill battle.
I mean, folks, there's a veteran out there right now who served in Vietnam, who's in a hospital, and his daughter's taking care of him, and his daughter, you know, took a leave of absence from work. She's not being paid, and she's fighting with the VA to help compensate her for caring for her father because he needs, care 24 hours a day. How do we streamline that? I mean, that's the real question. How do we prevent that from happening?
Well, the big answer to that, CJ, is we get rid of the bureaucratic crap in the language and directly to say this woman's not being helped. And
Yeah.
maybe that may be the only answer, because the VA hides behind its bureaucracy. It uses it as a shield to prevent it having to do anything. And then they can throw their arms up and say, well, we've done everything we can do. I think I'm not familiar with the individual case, but I'm familiar with the situation that person is in. And she's trying to become a caretaker,
Caregiver. Yeah.
And the VA will pay caregivers in certain situations. But the hurdles that you've got to go through are immense. And it could take months before you see a check. And even then, the check might be $1,200. It depends whether it's the veteran or the spouse of the veteran. So the check could be anywhere between $1,200 and $2,000 a month. It's not going to save everything.
Typically, by the time the check comes, unfortunately, the veteran has passed away, and
the VA knows that. They know that within days.
They know it immediately.
They know it immediately. The Social Security Administration, the funeral home sends the death certificate to Social Security. Social Security sends it to the VA, and they know it, and they notify you sometimes before you even have a death certificate in your hands.
That's right. They do.
You know that X so and so has died. But go the other route, try to get in there and get something from them. You could. It used to be paper driven, was not computer driven. It could take 2 to 3 years to get a case decided. When I took this job, to make a claim for a simple hearing disability was a paper driven form. It had maybe 4 pages to it. And I didn't even have to touch a computer. I just filled that out by hand and gave it to the guy. He signed it, we sent it in, and we sent it in by first class mail. It was certified. Today, that's all batched up in a computer. That very 3 to 4 page form is up to 12 pages. I have no idea what they're getting that they didn't get before. It's all computer based. They are even saying to 80 or 90-year-old people, please contact us online. These people don't have computers.
Yeah.
You can't do that. And everything is being funneled through the mind of a 30 or 40-year-old, and we're talking 80 or 90-year-old people. So
Kevin, so I got 2 things I want to end it with, and one of them was they can fix this, because when we had COVID, they had COVID released the funds to help stimulate the economy. That was, you put minimal information on there, all right, because I applied for it, right? Those funds were dispersed within weeks with the minimal amount of information. You're telling me, and not only that, and listen, it was, we can debate that they had to get it out quick. I understand because of the situation, but to the point where they did it so fast, and the way they did it, that people actually scammed, and people are getting now convicted of what they did, and people applied for it that didn't need it. So you're telling me, a veteran, you look at over their file, you served here, you did this. It should be straightforward. It should be the same amount of time that it was to release those COVID funds. It shouldn't take longer than that.
Well, I'm going to agree with you, and I'll be a little snide here, but I suggest that maybe if the VA were run by the pharmaceutical industry, it'd be a whole different story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please don't get me started on them either.
We're not even going there.
Yeah. No. But my second part of that was what is the VA doing to pressure Congress to whether either get more money or change the red tape and get these people approved.
I don't know that. I don't really know that they're doing anything, to be honest with you, Derek. Congress is motivated by who pays them the money.
Yeah, the lobbyists.
You pay them the money. I don't know if the VA even has a lobbyist to pay them money. Maybe they do, but they're not as effective as General Dynamics or Boeing or Pfizer, for that matter.
Yeah, the pharmaceuticals, right? That they push it, and that's a shame because that shouldn't even be the case. It should be taking care of the people who tried to protect us. And it's mind-boggling because it's too bad because if this country wasn't so divided, I think if we worked as a group of people together and put pressure on these people to do what's right, they would have to actually do their job.
I think they would, and the amount of money involved here is not going to break the bank.
No, not at all.
And there is a subline to this that I think people, when they're aware of it, really might wake up a little bit if they haven't seen it already. But every civilization that is in decline, one of the canaries in the gold mine for that decline is how they treat their veterans. It was particularly true in Rome, where Rome had legionnaires and they treated them with just great respect. And then gradually took their rights away, and they didn't have this and they didn't have that. And we all know how that ended up. Is that a fair contrast? I don't know. I think it's pretty close. I think we're not trending well. We're certainly not trending well in how we treat our veterans. There's a statement that I'm not trying to close the broadcast, but there is a statement.
No, that's fine.
There's a statement that I use at the end of every time I speak, and that is, no veteran has started a war, but he has ended every single one of them.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Kevin, your information it's your phone number. Do you mind if I share your phone number and your? Okay.
Nice.
So, okay, do you want to share your email and your phone numbers?
I'll be glad to. My office phone is 978-462-2201. That's 978-462-2201. Kevin Hunt, veteran officer, City of Newburyport. My email is the word veterans, that's plural, veterans at cityofnewburyport.com. I don't know why it's .com, but veterans.
I think everything's .com.
Everything's.com. Veterans at cityofnewburyport.com. Give me a call on any questions at all. I'll be glad to answer them or refer you out if I can.
Yeah, it's from my people in the streets. And this thing right here